Hello, this is Julian with Coffee Reviews, and today we will be recapping our reviews from the month of May 2023. This video will feature three things: a discussion of our favorite coffee this month, as well as any honorable mentions, our upcoming coffee of the month, and anything else pertaining to this channel that we feel is worth discussing or addressing. So let's go ahead and get started with our honorable mentions, and these are in order of when we reviewed them on this channel. And first up, we have the Favorninco, the Wash Process Columbia from Flower Child Coffee out of Oakland, California. And this was our first full bag review from this coffee roaster, though we did do a taste test rankings video featuring Flower Child. And I'd heard so many positive things about this coffee roaster, and I was pretty excited to see them release this coffee, as not only is it my type of coffee, but it is a pink bourbon coffee, and I'm a big fan of pink bourbon coffees. So I did go into this one with some pretty high expectations, and yet this coffee somehow exceeded those expectations by offering a very clean, sweet, and fruit-forward cup of coffee with a wonderful complementary brightness to it as well. Unfortunately, last I checked, this coffee was no longer available for purchase. In fact, as is typical with these recap videos, none of the coffees we are discussing here today are still available for purchase, with the exception of our coffee of the month right here. It's a little unfortunate, but given that Flower Child does offer my profile sort of coffees, these lighter profiled wash coffees, it wouldn't be too surprising to see us review them a fair bit more here in the future. But for this being our first full bag review from them, I was very impressed with this coffee. All right, next up, we have the Lady Bermudez, the double fermentation thermal shock processed Columbia from Hydrangea Coffee Roasters out of Berkeley, California. And this is also our first full bag review from this coffee roaster. And Lady Bermudez is quite familiar to a lot of people, as it's one of the most discussed coffees over the last couple of years. And I do always want to give credit to Diego Bermudez for releasing this coffee, but also credit to Hydrangea, as I imagine this coffee is probably a tricky one to work with. And anytime you are able to accentuate a lot of those peach forward components within this coffee, then it's going to be a very enjoyable coffee. I definitely did enjoy the Lady Bermudez from Manhattan a little bit more than this one, and I've often highlighted that it can be because you experience Lady Bermudez for the first time and that kind of imprints in your memory. It's really hard to replicate that same sort of experience the second time. Kind of think of it like the first time you had a natural processed Ethiopian coffee that tasted wildly blueberry forward. I feel like that's the same way you experience it with Lady Bermudez, but I still want to highlight them for a couple of reasons. They very much offered that cleaner than expected, especially given the processing method, sort of peach forward aspect that is present within Lady Bermudez. So that definitely made it one of my favorite coffees, as I have enjoyed Lady Bermudez since the very first time I tried it. So credit to Hydrangea for this one. I thought it was a pretty nice representation of Lady Bermudez. All right, next up, we have the Alaska del Sur, the wash processed Ecuador from George Howell Coffee out of Boston, Massachusetts. And would it be a recap video if we didn't feature at least one Mejorado Típica Mejorada coffee in the recap? And I was trying to decide between this one as well as the Felipe Luzon from Anomalous, but I did opt for this George Howell coffee for one reason, and that's that it's been a little more unique relative to a lot of the other Mejorado Típica Mejorada coffees that we have reviewed on this channel. While initially it did offer a very defined profile of the variety that we had experienced a lot from it in the past, I think what set this one apart was that it had a much more unique profile, mostly in terms of that very strong minty quality that was present, especially in the later days. And while I actually enjoyed this coffee earlier in its life by a significant margin, I think this one got me thinking a lot about what this profile is capable of, at least pertaining to this variety specifically. So this one intrigued me, and an interesting review will always be something that I enjoy discussing. So this is a coffee that at the very least caught my interest and attention. I do have a little bit of it frozen, and I'm curious as to what we might be able to do with it in the future. But I'm hoping that they will be releasing more coffees, most specifically this Alaska del Sur, in the future, as I do want to go back and try it again, see who else might have an opportunity to release this coffee. All right, that leads us to my favorite coffee this month, and that is the Jansen 841, the honey processed Panama from Rose Coffee Roasters out of Zurich, Switzerland. And I have so many positive things to say about this one. So let's start with the fact that Panamanian Geishas are my favorite coffee in the entire world. And this one was not hurt in the slightest by the fact that it was a honey process as opposed to a wash processed coffee, at least in terms of the clarity, because it still offered a wonderful abundance of clarity, scoring a level 5 in the clean category on our tasting wheel. But in addition to that, it offered the big 4 things I look for the most in coffee: a very, very clean profile to it, a very sweet and vibrant cup with wonderful florality, as well as wonderful fruit-forward components. And given that this one had a slight bit of that fruity pebble-like aspect, still offering great sweetness and a bit of a peach-forward cup, that definitely made it one of my favorite Panamanian Geishas that we've reviewed on this channel in a little bit. I have to give massive credit to this coffee roaster, as not only did I enjoy this one, I did enjoy their Kenyan coffee. I was actually a big fan of that Kenyan coffee that we reviewed from Rose, yet somehow this one far exceeded that coffee as well, as this is one of my favorite coffees that we have reviewed up to this point in the year. I believe I said in the review that I would not be surprised to see this coffee end up on our top 10 coffees of the year list, at the very least in the honorable mentions category, as this was a very impressive coffee from start to finish. Also a surprisingly easy to brew coffee as well. So massive credits to Rose. They're one of the European coffee roasters I do have my eye on. I'm definitely hoping to review some more of their coffees in the future. Speaking of European coffee roasters, that does lead us to our coffee of the month, and that is the Nestor Lasso, the Wash Process Colombia from Manhattan Coffee Roasters out of Rotterdam, Netherlands. And the theme behind this past month's coffee of the month was basically picking between 4 of the most well-known and well-liked European coffee roasters. And I will level with you as to how this entire theme started. There was a coffee from Tim Wendelboe that actually caught my interest. It was that SL28 Honduran coffee, and I was curious about that one. That inspired the theme, but while I was coming up with those coffees, not only had that one sold out, but there were some other ones that caught my interest. I don't think it'll come as a surprise to anybody that this one caught my interest, because it is a Mejorado, Típica Mejorada coffee. And it's also from Colombia, and it's the first one I've seen outside of Ecuador, so that was always going to catch my interest. And if I'm being completely honest, if this one did not win the poll, then I was probably going to end up reviewing it anyway, because it just was too interesting of a coffee to pass up. But in addition to that, the other coffees that we did feature in that poll were ones that were pretty interesting to me. I'm going to start with the April coffee, as that one right there, I think it was an Ethiopian variety that was also planted in Ecuador, so those always catch my interest. And then the final one was a natural processed Mejorado Típica Mejorada coffee from Café Circular. And I still might end up going back and reviewing that coffee, as we're due for a Café Circular order. Typically, I like to do it in one pretty big order to that way kind of get a good idea of some of the coffees that they are offering, as they are one of my favorite coffee roasters in the entire world. But let's really focus on this one right here. As I kind of mentioned, it is a Mejorado Típica Mejorada Colombian coffee, and I do expect it to be a very sweet coffee. Truth be told, this one was probably the one I wanted to see win the most, but in addition to that, I would have probably purchased this coffee from just about anybody that was offering it, given that it has the variety origin combination that I've never seen before. So I'm extremely curious to see the impact that the origin plays on this variety. All right, last thing worth discussing is something that I have been very open and transparent about for a very long time, but I did just kind of want to reiterate and discuss it one more time, and that is the idea of reviewing coffee that is sent to us from, well, most specifically coffee roasters and coffee companies, as I won't name the person that did, but we were reached out to by somebody that is pretty big, pretty well known, and I once again did decline to take their coffee for free. And I'll kind of give the reasons why here, and I've reiterated them before in the past. The first reason is I don't want to be biased. And even though these reviews are meant to be as objective as possible, kind of presenting you my view of this coffee, what I experienced from this coffee in a much more objective manner, and then at the end kind of offering my own opinions and preferences, I feel like my preferences are pretty well known at this point. I still kind of want to keep that as objective as possible and not be skewed by bias, or kind of have some people basically supplying us with things in the hopes of getting some really positive feedback on that. That's the first thing. But honestly, I feel like the second reason is much more important. I really want to support these coffee roasters, coffee companies, and coffee businesses by not only featuring them, highlighting their coffees, but also financially as well, as I have no issue paying for these coffees. there are times where, something might be a little out of price range, shipping might be a little bit more expensive than I can justify at times. But other than that, I mean, obviously we've spent a lot of money on so many coffees here to review. So that's something that I'm going to continue to do in the future. As mentioned, I bring it up because somebody did reach out to me, and at the same time, I do plan on purchasing the coffee from them directly here at some point in the future. I actually kind of was waiting out a couple of things to get some feedback from others about this coffee as well, but at the same time, if somebody's going to reach out to me and ask about potentially reviewing their coffee, then I will definitely take it into consideration. At the very least, we'll put it on the suggestions, recommendations list. But truth be told, it's a coffee roaster and a coffee that I've also had my own personal interest in. I was just waiting for a couple of things to be sorted out before I actually jumped the gun and purchased some of those coffees. So I know that's kind of, ominous. It's a little... It doesn't give you a full picture of exactly what I'm discussing, but basically it's just here to say that if I get people reaching out to us about reviewing their coffees, then I'm going to say the same thing every single time, that I'll purchase the coffee if it's something that you really feel is important. That's not basically an open invite to everybody saying, hey, purchase this coffee, but I'll definitely take it into consideration. And I won't say who, but it'll probably be featured here sometime in the near future, the one that I'm specifically referencing in this case as well. I think that's kind of it, though. I feel like this was actually one of the better months of coffee as well. I'm pretty excited about this coffee of the month, but that's kind of the best way I want to leave this recap. If you guys by chance enjoyed these videos, give this one a like, subscribe if you're not already subscribed. This right here has been a recap of our coffees from the month of May 2023. Thank you for watching.